freshman walks her friends back to the dorm out of basic kindness and never makes it to the party she was heading toward. By sunrise, a railroad worker spots what he thinks is a discarded mannequin in the brush outside Columbus. It isn't. It's 18-year-old Ohio State student Stephanie Hummer. Welcome back to Criminist, where we break down real cases with facts, timelines, and respect for the victims. Not cheap shock value. If you appreciate this kind of storytelling, make sure you watch till the end and support Criminist by liking, subscribing, and sharing this video. Stephanie Ann Hummer was born on August 4, 1975, in Cincinnati, Ohio. She grew up in a tight-knit family with her parents and two younger brothers. She pulled straight A grades, played soccer and softball, played violin, loved classical music, and caddied at a local golf course with her dad. Her work ethic paid off. She earned the prestigious Evans, or Chick Evans, caddy scholarship, which covered full tuition. In 1993, at 18, she headed to Ohio State University to study landscape architecture and quickly settled into campus life, making friends and planning a bright future. On March 5, 1994, Stephanie's family was in Columbus for her younger brother's math competition. Two of her close friends from Cincinnati had come to visit, and that evening everyone crowded into her dorm room, talking, laughing, and enjoying a normal college night. After midnight, two male students from Cincinnati, former high school classmates, stopped by. Around 3 a.m., they invited everyone to a party at their dorm, about a 15-minute walk away. The group headed out into the quiet campus. Halfway there, one of the guys tried to climb a fence to cut across a courtyard, didn't see a sharp metal rod, and tore his arm open. He and his friends sprinted back toward their dorm to get it bandaged, leaving Stephanie and her two friends on the sidewalk. By then it was late, and her friends were rethinking the party. They had to head home in the morning. Stephanie still wanted to stop by, but first insisted on walking them back to her dorm. She walked them to the building, said goodbye, and then turned around alone to head toward the guy's dorm and the party. She never made it. When Stephanie's friends woke up and realized she still hadn't come back, they assumed she'd just crashed at the other dorm. As the hours passed and there was still no sign of her, worry turned into panic. Near noon, they went to campus police and reported her missing. Around the same time, another call was already in motion. At about 10 a.m., a railroad worker creeping along tracks about 4 miles from campus spotted something in the brush that looked like a mannequin. When he climbed down to check, he realized it was a young woman's body. Police arrived to a grim scene. The victim was almost completely undressed, wearing only socks and shoes, with her bra looped around her neck. No purse, no ID, no obvious way to tell who she was. The area was known for drugs and sex work, and at first detectives assumed the victim might be connected to that world. One suggested another possibility, that she could be an Ohio State student. Campus police mentioned the fresh missing person report. Stephanie's father gave a description, and everything lined up. Her parents turned their car around, drove back to Columbus, and at the morgue confirmed the body was their daughter. The medical examiner found that Stephanie died from blunt force trauma to the head. She'd also been sexually assaulted. Investigators collected semen for DNA testing and swabbed her neck, where bruising at first looked like possible strangulation, but more closely resembled hickeys. Those samples went to the lab. Time of death was placed between 3 and 6 a.m., the same window when Stephanie left her friends and vanished. Detectives first questioned Stephanie's friends, who described the late-night walk and the fence accident. Then they went to the dorm where the two guys lived. Both men said Stephanie never showed up, and everyone they spoke to at the party backed that up. No one remembered seeing her there. Police asked about romantic connections. Had either man been intimate with Stephanie? Could the marks on her neck point to someone she knew? Both insisted she was just a friend. The bandage on Thomas's arm drew attention, but he repeated the story about cutting it on the fence, and his friend confirmed it. Both men agreed to polygraph tests and DNA samples. With nothing concrete against them yet, detectives moved on, until the lab called. The DNA from the marks on Stephanie's neck produced a full profile. It matched Thomas, the student with the injured arm. Officers brought him back in. Earlier, he'd said there was nothing romantic between them. Now he claimed they had been making out in her dorm that night, but said it never went further than kissing. None of the other friends remembered seeing that. Thomas said it happened while they were in another room, and that he'd simply forgotten to mention it. Detectives briefly considered whether he might have met Stephanie again later as she walked alone toward his dorm. Then the semen results came back. The DNA from the sexual assault did not match Thomas. It belonged to an unknown male with no entry in the FBI database. Stephanie may have kissed Thomas that night, but he was not the man who raped and killed her. Police collected DNA from every student in his dorm. No match. Whoever left that semen wasn't in the system and didn't live in that building. With no identified suspect, investigators built a likely sequence of events. Stephanie left her dorm area alone, heading toward the party. Her body was found a 10-minute drive away by the railroad tracks. Detectives believed the attacker struck her on or near campus, then loaded her unconscious into a vehicle and drove to the remote spot. There, they believed, he sexually assaulted her while she was still unconscious. At some point, she woke up and tried to escape. The crushed brush near where she was found suggested someone had pushed through it, trying to run. She didn't get far. The attacker chased her down, caught her, and beat her to death. Officers canvassed the campus and surrounding neighborhoods, talking to students, residents, and business owners. No one reported seeing a woman running or hearing a struggle. Over the next few years, several men fell under suspicion. A would-be campus abductor, a man who confessed with suspicious details, and an ex-con in white work vans who posed as an undercover cop around college women. Police searched vehicles, collected evidence, and took DNA from each of them. One suspect had reportedly tried to pull a woman into his car near campus, which sounded terrifyingly close to what might have happened to Stephanie. For a moment, detectives thought they'd finally found their guy. Same general area, similar victim profile, same window of time. But when they swabbed him, his DNA didn't match. Another man came forward with a so-called confession. On paper, that sounds like a breakthrough. But in real life, these confessions can be messy. He got basic facts wrong, details that had never been made public, and that the real killer would almost certainly know. It felt more like a bid for attention than a genuine admission of guilt. His DNA ruled him out too. Then there was the man in the white work vans, cruising the campus area and pretending to be an undercover cop to get women alone. He was creepy, he was predatory, and he was exactly the kind of person detectives feared might be behind Stephanie's murder. They tracked him, searched his vehicles, and collected samples. Even inmates tried to claim responsibility from behind bars, some hoping for a deal, others maybe just chasing notoriety. None of them matched either. Despite public appeals and countless interviews, the trail went cold, and Stephanie's file slowly joined the long stack of unsolved cases. For the public, it became one more tragedy that had faded from the headlines. For her family, and for a few detectives who took the case personally, it never stopped being an open wound. 12 years of waiting. Stephanie's parents refused to let their daughter be forgotten. They spoke to the media, begged for leads, and pushed for the case to stay open. Her dad kept her memory close in everyday ways: photos around the house, stories, and the ongoing fight to make sure her murder wasn't just a line in an old police report. Investigators checked every tip, every jailhouse rumor, every supposed "I heard someone brag about this" lead. Each time there was a flutter of hope, and each time it broke the same way: dead end. Over time, the case folder got thicker, but not clearer. Detectives transferred, retired, or moved into other units. Eventually, the evidence was boxed, the files were shelved, and the case landed in the cold case unit. But cold doesn't always mean forgotten. Some officers carried Stephanie with them, literally. One former lead detective was known to keep her photo in his wallet and visit her memorial over the years. A quiet, personal promise that if anything new ever surfaced, he'd be ready to jump. For more than a decade, the investigation lived in this frustrating limbo, not active enough to dominate resources, but never truly closed. What nobody knew at the time was that the evidence sitting in those boxes was already enough to identify her killer. The technology in the database just hadn't caught up yet. In 2005, Ohio began collecting DNA from all convicted felons, not just from certain violent offenders. Before that, a person could rack up a long history of arrests and even serve time for felonies like failure to pay child support, and still never have their DNA entered into any statewide system. With the new law in place, jails and prisons across the state started taking cheek swabs from thousands of people. Those profiles flooded into CODIS, the national DNA database used to compare crime scene samples with known offenders. This is where science quietly does what humans can't. It doesn't forget, it doesn't get tired, and it doesn't have hunches. it just looks for matches. On January 17, 2006, Columbus police finally got the call they'd been waiting 12 years for. There was a hit. The DNA collected from Stephanie's body in 1994 matched a profile that had just been entered. It belonged to a Columbus man named Jonathan Gravely. At the time of the murder, he lived about a 12-minute walk from campus. He was 24, already the father of 2 children. In the years that followed, he divorced, remarried, had 2 more kids, and worked a regular job at a local manufacturing plant. He also had a record, 17 arrests for things like drugs, alcohol, and DUIs. But none of those earlier cases had triggered mandatory DNA collection. That changed when he was convicted in a felony child support case and, under the new law, finally had to give a sample. The trigger for that arrest was almost painfully ordinary. He'd skipped a child support payment, and his ex-wife called police. During processing, officers swabbed his cheek. That sample was uploaded. CODIS did its silent comparison in the background, and it hit on the DNA from the sexual assault in Stephanie's case. After 12 years, investigators finally knew whose DNA they'd been staring at in lab reports since 1994. 2 days after the DNA hit, the current lead detective and the retired investigator who'd once carried Stephanie's file like a personal mission walked into Jonathan's workplace. Imagine that moment. You're at your job, maybe thinking about lunch or your next shift, and 2 detectives show up, asking to talk about a 12-year-old murder. When they approached him, his hands shook. That reaction alone told them a lot. Still, he agreed to come down to the station. In the interview room, they started with the basics. Did he remember an Ohio State student named Stephanie? Had he ever been near campus? Then they dropped the bomb. His DNA had been found on her body. Confronted with the evidence, Jonathan first claimed he'd met Stephanie in a bar, that they left together and had consensual sex. On the surface, that might sound like a possible scenario, but it didn't fit anything detectives already knew. She was 18. The legal drinking age was 21. Witnesses had last seen her heading to a dorm party, not bar hopping alone at 3 a.m., and none of her friends mentioned her sneaking off to meet a stranger at a bar. Pressed on those inconsistencies, Jonathan shifted his story. Now, he said, things started consensually, then turned into an argument when she supposedly threatened to tell his wife. He admitted hitting her and claimed everything after that was a blur, like his memory conveniently went fuzzy right when the violence escalated. Detectives believed something else entirely, that Jonathan, driving his white van, spotted Stephanie walking alone near campus, used some pretext, directions, help, authority, something, to get close, struck her, loaded her unconscious into the van, sexually assaulted her at the remote site, and killed her when she tried to escape. He never admitted to the abduction, but he did admit to killing her. Combined with the DNA, that was more than enough to charge him with murder. Prosecutors announced they would seek the death penalty. That decision instantly raised the stakes. A judge set Jonathan's bail at a symbolic $1 billion, sending a loud message. This was a serious, predatory crime, and he wouldn't be walking out of jail while the case moved forward. His defense team tried to push back. They argued that his confession was taken improperly, that he hadn't clearly agreed to talk without a lawyer. They hinted that his memory was unreliable, that maybe he didn't fully understand what he was admitting to. Friends and relatives, like his fiancée, insisted he was innocent, that he was a family man, a worker, someone who had turned his life around. Prosecutors, meanwhile, had something that doesn't care about character references, DNA, plus a scenario that matched the physical evidence, a stranger abduction, sexual assault, and murder. Facing the possibility of a death sentence, Jonathan took a plea deal. Prosecutors agreed to drop the death penalty if he pleaded guilty to aggravated murder and kidnapping. In September 2007, he did just that. In court, he briefly apologized to Stephanie's family, but it was short, almost clinical, more legal formality than genuine emotion. Her family addressed the court and made it clear they didn't believe his remorse. They'd lived through 12 years of not knowing, followed by the gut punch of learning that while they were grieving, he had been out living a normal life, working, raising kids, celebrating holidays, all with a secret only he and the evidence knew. The judge sentenced Jonathan Gravely to 25 years to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after a set minimum period. It wasn't the death penalty, but it was a sentence that could, in practice, still mean he spends the rest of his life behind bars. Years passed, and the legal part of the story shifted into a new phase: parole. Jonathan came up for parole in 2023. For Stephanie's loved ones, that meant reliving everything, digging back into the worst days of their lives so they could show up and argue that the man who killed her should not be released. The board denied him, but under his sentence, he'll keep getting chances to ask for release in the future. Stephanie's father and others close to her have promised to attend those hearings, as many as it takes, for as long as they're able. It's a kind of second sentence placed on families of victims. Every few years, they have to open old wounds so the system doesn't forget what happened. Her mother tragically died of cancer 8 years after the guilty plea and never lived to see that first review. For her, justice ended with the conviction, and even that didn't erase the loss. In Stephanie's hometown, a small park now bears her name, a quiet green place where kids play, where people walk dogs, where neighbors pass by on ordinary days. Family and friends gather there to remember a brilliant student and caring sister whose life ended on a night that should have been completely ordinary. Her case is a reminder of how crucial DNA laws can be. Without Ohio's decision to expand DNA collection to all felons, her killer might never have been identified. At the same time, it's a sobering thought. The evidence that solved her case was there from day one. The system just needed 12 years and a legal change to catch up. At the center of this story is a chilling reality. Stephanie did everything most of us would call safe. She walked on familiar streets, stayed in a busy college area, and made sure her friends got home. She wasn't taking wild risks or walking into obviously dangerous situations. She was just being a good friend. But sometimes all it takes is crossing paths with one determined predator on the wrong night. Stories like this highlight something uncomfortable. Personal safety isn't just about what you do, it's also about the world you're moving through. Who's out there, what systems are in place, and whether those systems are strong enough to catch dangerous people before or at least after they hurt someone. In Stephanie's case, 3 things came together: the investigators who refused to give up, her family and friends who kept her memory alive, and a change in the law that forced a DNA sample from a man who'd slipped through the cracks for more than a decade. When those pieces finally aligned, the truth that had been sitting inside a lab freezer since 1994 finally had a name. If you found this breakdown informative and believe Stephanie's story deserves to be remembered, please support Criminest by liking this video, subscribing, and turning on notifications so you don't miss future deep dive cases. Drop a comment and tell us, what do you think made the biggest difference in finally solving this case? The DNA database, the law change, or the persistence of Stephanie's family and investigators? And how do you feel about killers like Jonathan getting repeated chances at parole after crimes like this? Thank you for watching, thank you for supporting Criminest, and as always, stay safe, stay curious, and take care of each other.